Hello, I'm Patricia Anthony, and we will be looking at a case study involving Mia Muffins Bakeries. Mia owns 15 bakeries in 5 states and growing. At each bakery location, Mia employs around 10 to 15 people, depending on the season. As the company continues to expand, the owner, Mia, has some concerns involving a claim of discrimination from an applicant in the customer service position. Due to the recent discrimination complaint and recent exploiting expansion, Mia has decided to hire a human resource staff at each bakery location. Mia wants the new HR department to develop a selection plan that can be used at all bakery locations. The first thing we will look at in the selection plan is discrimination. Since practices and policies have affected applicants and caused a complaint of discrimination against the company, Mia is vulnerable to charges of discrimination under the Civil Rights Act of 1964, 1978, and 1991. This legal determination hinges on a definition of a protected class, ethnicity, gender, and the explicit description of the process. Desperate treatment and desperate impact both involve discrimination. Desperate treatment is a form of intentional discrimination in which an employer deliberately discriminates against the employee based on specific characteristics like race and sex. Desperate impact, also known as adverse impact, focuses on the effect of employment practices rather than on the motive or intent underlying them. I would recommend HR adopt a policy that looks for 4 factors. The first factor, does this person belong to a protected class? Second, was the person who applied, were they qualified for the position the employer was trying to fill? Third, was the person rejected despite being qualified? And fourthly, did the position remain open and the employer continue to seek applicants as qualified as the person rejected? Next in the selection plan is job description and job analysis. Job descriptions list the major tasks, duties, and responsibilities of a job. A job analysis is defined as the ability of a HR representative to compile information to update an organization's job description in order to gather, analyze, synthesize, and report information about job requirements and rewards. As job descriptions fall under the job analysis category, I recommend that the HR department utilize the 3 job analysis techniques to acquire the appropriate information needed to fill out job descriptions and to keep the job descriptions up to date. HR will first use the job requirements approach to analyze the employee's current position, allowing HR to collect data on tasks, duties, and other responsibilities from both employees and management to create a job matrix. Utilizing this approach will allow HR to establish well-defined job descriptions with specific observable characteristics. According to the Betterment website, properly written job position descriptions are often the only documents that totally define what a role is, what skills are required to perform it, and where the role fits in the organization. End quote. Next, HR will utilize the competency approach. This looks at keeping the job descriptions relevant. The competency approach concentrates on the organization's strategy from the perspective of the company's executives on their contributions of the employees. This approach also links the organization's strategy with the planning process to determine which knowledge, skills, ability, and other characteristics to be applied to the job description. HR will finally use the jobs rewards approach, which focuses on what employees get from their current work. When utilizing this approach, information needs to be gathered from employees on the preferred and desired outcomes of their employment. Next in the selection plan is the recruitment strategy. Recruiting involves looking for applicants both internally and externally. Internal recruitment is the process of identifying and enticing current employees for open positions utilizing closed, open, and hybrid systems. External recruitment involves the organization trying to peddle itself to potential applicants utilizing open and targeted concepts with a clear message. I recommend for HR to fill the customer service position, they need to define strategic goals, complete a recruiting planning phase, and then implement the recruiting strategy. HR should weigh the pros and cons of recruiting internally and externally for the customer service position while utilizing advertisements and the company's webpage, along with the hybrid recruit system. HR should then decide how they will market to applicants. This will allow them to recruit using a realistic message technique as it points out both the positive and negative aspects of the customer service position. This messaging works best when turnover is costly. Next, HR will gather applicants from many sources while evaluating quantity, quality, and cost of the recruitment. Recruitment sources utilized with a realistic message are employee referrals and social networking sites, job postings and nominations. Utilizing employee referrals and social networking sites will benefit Mia Muffins with higher performance, higher satisfaction, and lower turnover. Job postings and nominations will reduce turnover and identify those who are good performers while targeting those who need training. If HR follows this recruitment strategy, Mia Muffins will fill the customer service position while increasing job retention. Next in the selection plan is selection predictors. Selection predictors refers to the assessment and evaluation of job applicants that uses a variety of assessment methods. These initial methods are reviewed for frequency of use, cost, reliability, validity, utility, applicant reaction, and adverse impact. Selection is a process for internal and external hiring of candidates utilizing structured and unstructured interviews. I recommend HR to decide which knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics they will use during the structured or unstructured interview. After they decide this, then a validity test should be completed to ensure that knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics used are legally defensible. Validity is the degree to which there is a relationship between two variables in a population. Calculating the correlation coefficient will help determine if these results are statistically significant. If the p-value is less than 0.05, the results will be statistically significant. Gregorio Bilikoff at the University of California states, improving the validity of a selection approach entails designing a job-related questions or tests, applying them consistently to all applicants, and eliminating Rayer bias or error, end quote. As the lack of consistency in treatment of applicants is one of the major factors contributing to the occurrence of discrimination in staffing due to the lack of standardization and measurement. Next in the selection plan is type of scoring system. Scoring systems consist of selection predictors that indicate the degree of success from past situations can be predicted for future endeavors. Selection predictors are differentiated from one another by content and form, meaning a person's knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics. These predictions are then used in cut scoring, which is the minimum number an applicant must meet to be considered a qualified candidate. Minimum competency, top-down, and banding are all methods used in determining cut scores that follow the Uniform Guidelines on Employee Selection Procedures. I recommend that HR use a top-down method for cut scoring in the hiring process, as it can easily be administered to applicants and yields the highest validity and utility, minimizing judgment required, as scores are determined on the demand for labor. However, HR should understand that using this method, validity is not frequently established before the use of a predictor, and it can possibly cause adverse impact. The Uniform Guidelines on Employee Selection Procedures state that if a cut score will produce adverse impact, then the guidelines are required in the decision process. In adverse impact situations, HR is required to quit or eliminate all occurrence or justify it by conducting validity studies and watchfully setting cut scores. According to the Society for Human Resource Management, the Uniform Guidelines provide standards for the proper use of employment testing, including the definition of discrimination in testing, the appropriate means of validating selection procedures that may be discriminatory, the acceptable methods of establishing and implementing cutoff scores or pass points on selection procedures, and the documentation of validity for selection procedures. End quote. Under the Uniform Guidelines on Employee Selection Procedures, HR should be cautious that their cut scores are not higher than what's necessary to accomplish hiring. Whatever cut score used, HR should document when they began using the uniform guideline procedures and how they're using them. Other options to eliminate adverse impact is to use alternative selection procedures or affirmative action procedures and use work samples versus tests while encouraging the adoption and implementation of voluntary affirmative action. In conclusion, for Mia to resolve the discrimination issues within her company and to continue expansion, she should follow the recommendations I have provided in establishing a selection plan for her HR department and use it across the enterprise of Mia Muffins. These are the references I used to complete this PowerPoint.